I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the accused Long Island serial killer. This case has literally been decades in the making, but new developments continue, including a 7th victim. Here's the story. The investigation into the Long Island serial killer began as a search for a missing woman named Shannon Gilbert, a 23-year-old woman who disappeared near Gilgo Beach in 2010. When investigators started the search, instead of finding Shannon, they came across body after body after body on a strip of beach on Long Island. It began with the Gilgo 4, then more victims, eventually totaling 10, until Shannon's remains were finally found on another nearby beach. Then, 13 years later, an arrest for the murders of the Gilgo 4, but not for the murder of Shannon Gilbert. The accused Long Island serial killer was revealed to the world, an engineer who commuted to work every day from Long Island, where he lived with his family. Then, the investigation continued, revealing more victims. Number 5, number 6, and now victim number 7, Valerie Mack. The suspect has denied the allegations as the allegations continue to stack up. It's amazing when you look at the history of this case and how far back you go with some of the victims and how they continue to investigate, continue to uncover more information, and are able to charge the accused killer with more and more cases. I want you to take a listen to the DA, Raymond Thierry from the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. And really, the task force and the DA together have done an amazing job, finally, after so many years of putting this case together. Here's the latest.
My office filed a superseding indictment charging the defendant Heuermann with a 7th charged murder in the 2nd degree for the murder of Valerie Mack, which occurred in 2000. I remind everyone that all of these cases and all of these murders are just allegations, and we look forward to proving them in court. As I've previously stated, the work of the Gilgo Task Force is ongoing and continuing, and when I said that, I meant what I said. The defendant is now charged with the murder of 7 young women, Sandra Castilla from 1993, Valerie Mack from 2000, Jessica Taylor from 2003, Maureen Brainerd Barnes from 2007, Melissa Bartholomew from 2009, Megan Waterman from 2010 in June, and Amber Costello from September of 2010.
Unbelievable. The task force is still working, but now we're talking about Valerie Mack, and that brings us to the first question in our investigation, which is, how did they connect the accused killer to the 7th victim, Valerie Mack? How did they make that connection? It goes all the way back, as you heard, to 2000. Joining me to help us through all of this, psychotherapist and author of the book, The Minds of Mass Killers, Understanding and Interpreting the Pathway to Violence. Siobhan Scott is with us, and the laboratory director for Pure Gold Forensics. She has more than 20 years of experience in DNA analysis, forensic DNA expert, Susanna Ryan. Thank you both for being here. I want to play just a little bit more of what Raymond Tierney, the DA, had to say about this particular case.
We have mitochondrial DNA from a hair that was found on the body of Valerie Mack, which was a portion of the body of Valerie Mack, which was found off of Mill Road. That hair, mitochondrial DNA analysis was performed, and that hair was consistent with the mitochondrial DNA profiles of both Asa Heuermann and her daughter, Asa Ellerup, and her daughter, Victoria Heuermann, and I believe the numbers are to an exclusion of 99.96% of the population.
Okay, let me begin with you, Susanna Ryan. Walk us through the process and how they would take this hair and then link it to this man.
Well, the first thing you have to determine is is it a hair at all? So a lot of times when we are looking at a piece of evidence, we might see something that we think is a hair. We need to look at that under the microscope and make a determination that it's a hair as compared to a fiber, for example. And then if it's a hair, we need to determine whether it's a human hair. If it's a human hair, we're going to look for a root. And that's because most of the cellular material where we would get a nuclear DNA profile is going to be in the root of the hair. And of course, not all hairs have roots, and not all roots are in the right stage of growth. So in this case, I can tell that the hair was either didn't have a root or was not in the right stage of growth because they needed to do mitochondrial DNA testing. And mitochondrial DNA testing is very different than autosomal or nuclear testing. And that's because in the cell, when we're talking about regular DNA testing, we've got 2 copies of DNA in that nucleus. With mitochondrial DNA, there are actually hundreds or even thousands of copies of mitochondria per cell, and each one of those have their own DNA. So it's different than nuclear DNA. But we have a much better chance of getting a result from something like a hair with mitochondrial DNA testing. But the downside to that is that it's not nearly as discriminating. It's harder to distinguish between people. And you kind of heard that in his in the comments that were made, because he's saying, look, the daughter and the wife can't be excluded. We can exclude, 99.6% of the population, and we can't exclude these 2 individuals, but it also would not exclude anybody in the maternal line of this family. So they actually didn't stop there. There was additional DNA testing that was conducted. And that type of testing was the SNP testing, the single nucleotide polymorphisms. That's the same type of testing we hear about with genetic genealogy or, family tree DNA, that sort of analysis. When they did this testing, now they have a result that is stronger than any result I've ever seen statistically, because it's a 1 followed by 356 zeros. That's how strong the result is. I tried to look up that number. It's so large, we don't even really have a name for that number.
Siobhan Scott, take us into the mind now of this accused killer, learning that he's been charged in another case, that perhaps another mistake was made by him. My guess is there's a level of narcissism that may run through his veins. How do you think this is impacting him?
I can only speculate, but I'm guessing that this is still the tip of the iceberg for Heuermann. I mean, we know he had a 30-year time span where he was absolutely fixated on serial killing and on hatred of women, and the incredible documentation that's available online, much of it, but from the spreadsheets and the detailed planning. I would guess by this point he knows that more is in the process of being discovered all the time. And I think, again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So he may be disappointed, but I don't think he's terribly surprised.
Susanna, how much has changed? Because this case with Valerie Mack goes back to 2000. They preserved this evidence, and now they're testing it, more than 2 decades later. They were able to get this mitochondrial DNA. How much has the technology changed versus when the murder took place?
Right. It certainly has changed, especially that later testing that I just mentioned, the SNP testing. We did have some mitochondrial DNA testing available to us in 2000, but only at very few laboratories, and it was really rarely used. And in this case, it was not used until 2024. So we did have the mitochondrial testing where we could, easily exclude somebody. And if they were included, it might be their hair, or it might be anyone in their maternal line. But it's really the testing available today with the SNP testing, where we can really just basically individualize a person and say, it's virtually saying this is their hair. When you have a statistic that is so rare, there are 8 billion people on this planet. That's an 8 followed by 9 zeros. Here we have the number 1 followed by 300 and some zeros. I mean, the chances of finding another person with that same SNP profile is virtually impossible.
Siobhan Scott, you know, the other part of this is you look at him and his history. So many years. I mean, going back, the DA's talking about going back to 1993, to be able to presumably get away with it for all those years and to now finally be caught and the cases start to pile up. Do people like this have a sense that they are going to get caught, or do they hold on to the belief that, hey, listen, I can get away with this?
Yeah, good question. You mentioned the narcissism factor before, and I think for most of them, that's a huge piece of what's going on in addition to psychopathy and sadism. But they do think they're smarter than everyone else. They do think they're special. And we know that in this case, he actually made calls to victims' families taunting them in at least one of the cases. And so they really do have this bizarre sense of getting away with things. We also know with the spreadsheets he kept that were recovered, that there was just absolutely meticulous planning on, you know, dismembering the bodies, washing the bodies, trying to clear all trace evidence, cutting tattoos off, just sadistic, horrible things. And he very well may have been quite proud of himself that he got away with it for so long. And
one final question, Susanna. There may very well be a trial or trials in this case. Is any of this evidence in a space that you work in DNA, where there can be differing opinions and differing interpretations of results like this?
Well, you know, without having looked at the results, it's hard for me to say, but certainly, especially in a high-profile case like this, there's going to be an opposing expert that will certainly pour through these notes and bench notes. And frankly, some of the technology that was used is very new. So they're going to have to review it. It may be one of the first times used in court. So that's definitely going to be something that has to be reviewed very carefully by defense DNA expert.
Absolutely. Anytime you have new science in a courtroom, it is always challenged. Absolutely.
Yes.
Susanna Ryan, thank you so much for your insight. Siobhan is going to stay with us. Coming up next, why were the remains in two different locations?
We see that one of the dump sites which were discussed in that document was Mill Road, which was the road that Valerie was found in the vicinity of.
How are we doing, guys? We're good? Okay.
You're on very shaky ground.
That is unreal.
People wanted answers, and people started locking their doors.
I did not do it to hurt anybody.
You know what it means. You know what you did, right?
Please hear me out. Please.
This was a real-life soap opera.
I said, OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty.
Valerie's body was discovered on November 19th, 2000, in a wooded area off of Mill Road by hunters.
Valerie Mack, the seventh alleged victim of the Long Island serial killer who's been named. Now, not seventh in terms of when she was murdered, but seventh in terms of when he was charged with her murder. I want to go through a little bit of a timeline and a map here so you get a better idea of what happened to Valerie here. On November 19th, 2000 in Manorville, 1 mile west of Halsey Manor Road and north of Mill Road, Valerie Mack's partial remains were discovered by 3 hunters who found a plastic bag wrapped with duct tape. Inside the first bag was an additional black plastic bag containing the decapitated body of Valerie Mack. Both of her hands had been severed from her arms above the wrists, and her right leg had been cut off at the mid-calf. That's 2000. Move now forward to April 4th, 2011 in Gilgo Beach. Valerie Mack's skull, hands, and right foot were discovered as part of the expanded search of the Gilgo Beach area. By 2011, I think it's mostly bones that are found. The partial remains were discovered along Ocean Parkway, less than 1.5 miles east of where Jessica Taylor's skull, hands, and forearm were discovered. Each of the 5 previously discovered victim remains on Gilgo Beach, as well as the skull, hands, and right foot of Ms. Mack, were recovered on the same side of the road and at a similar depth of within 50 feet from the edge of the parkway. So here, Valerie Mack's remains are found in 2 different places. I want to show you on this map, they're not next to one another. You're talking about 42 miles apart. 42 miles. So that's what happened to Valerie Mack's remains, which brings us to our next question in our investigation. Why were the remains in 2 different locations? Why are the remains in 2 different locations? Psychotherapist Siobhan Scott is still with us, and joining us, former homicide detective, host of The Interview Room with Chris McDonough. It's Chris McDonough. Chris, as a homicide detective and investigator, what does that tell you when you find remains in 2 different locations?
Well, Vinnie, I mean, the easy answer right up front, if you were thinking like this predator, because he would be what would classify as an apex predator. I mean, he's at the top of the food chain in relationship to not only his learning curve, but his success rate. And so one of 2 things occurs. The first one is obviously the most obvious. Is this a play that he puts into motion to, play the cops and throw them off of, from one point to the next point? The second is, a psychological play. Is this a continual power and control move whereby he still has possession of the victim, i.e. only he knows where she's at, and it maintains his fantasy in relationship to his sadistic sexual behavior? So those are a couple of reasons why these individuals would do something like this, and if he falls into that category, those potentially could be 2 reasons why.
Siobhan Scott, so Jessica Taylor and Valerie, both their remains were similarly disposed of in those 2 different locations, relatively close to each other in those locations, and there were many more found on Gilgo as we look at the map right here. What are your thoughts about the why of it? Why separate those remains? Why other remains may not have been separated?
Yeah, it's really hard to know for sure. Of course, when you look at it, is he just trying to minimize detection? Is there a strategy behind it? We know he was a planner when it came down to every detail of what he did. Or is there a psychological significance? As was just stated, the power, the control. Was he doing something with part of the remains, which is a terrible thought, but always possible? And was there another aspect of the ritual? Because we know with a sexual domination or a lust killer like this, ritual is a big part of what they're doing. That's what drives them. They're trying to recreate a fantasy in their mind, and they get basically addicted to it and compulsive, and they do it over and over again. So was there an element of ritual involved in, spreading the remains this way? And that can be something that they change over time. It can shift, and so you may see variations like that.
Chris McDonough, from a practical standpoint, if you look at body markings, whether it's a birthmark or a tattoo or something, is that another reason or another potential reason to put the remains in 2 different places and make it more difficult for folks like you to figure out whose remains they are?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a possibility, right, Vinnie? I mean, when you have an individual, to dovetail in what Siobhan was just saying there a moment ago, when you have an individual who really is emerging through their sadistic behaviors. Remember, this individual is learning from each and every crime that they commit, And if we go back to the list that she had mentioned in the earlier segment, this guy was, meticulous in his notes. I mean, he's an architect. And so when you apply that principle, right, of what he may be thinking, and then you apply it to your question about, if he's removing markings, from the body, is that a deceptive practice to throw law enforcement off? Absolutely, that has to come to the surface as a sincere possibility that this guy's trying to outsmart the PD.
Siobhan, do you think there was a level of comfort that he had with Gilgo Beach because so many remains were there that it was sort of, listen, this is a spot I can go to, I'm familiar with it, and I've been doing it for a while and nobody's finding anything? Yeah, it just became the main dumping ground. But as I said, I think there are probably more locations, and who knows what will be found there. So that's hopefully something we can get some answers to over time. Yeah, and Chris, we have about 15 seconds left here or so. How do you think you get to those other locations?
That's anybody's guess, but if they go back and look at his habit patterns in relationship to his traveling, they'll figure that out. All right, big thank you to Siobhan Scott. I know you have a busy night tonight. We really appreciate your time. Chris McDonough is going to stick around. Up next, how did the accused killer allegedly plan this murder? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the accused Long Island serial killer. Going to the mind of a serial killer is a dark place. And in this case, things are getting really dark. Here's the story. The investigation into the suspected Long Island Gilgo Beach serial killer has revealed some very shocking things. And it all begins with the suspect himself. He lived and worked among us in society, functioning as an architect, husband and father, commuting from Massapequa into New York City. From there, however, much of what we learn seems to fit the mold of a serial killer. A strange home in a neighborhood which seemed out of place, awkward interactions with people, and a seemingly large interest in the Long Island killings. But it took years for authorities to make an arrest. First, local police corruption sidetracked everything until a new task force was formed. And once they started their investigation, it took months to zero in on a suspect. And now the suspected serial killer has been charged with the murder of a seventh victim, Valerie Mack. It's amazing that we've gotten to this point, because there was a point during my coverage of this through the years, I never thought we would be here. I never thought there would be an arrest. And now not just an arrest, but connecting the accused killer to more and more victims, including Valerie Mack. So we're learning a lot more, which brings us to our next question, which is, how did the accused killer allegedly plan this murder? Details, a lot of details going into the darkness of the mind of an accused serial killer. Joining me to help us through all this, an expert on serial killers and professor of forensic psychology and author of the book, How to Catch a Killer, Hunting and Capturing the World's Most Notorious Serial Killers. Dr. Catherine Ramslin is with us, and he represents the family of victim Shannon Gilbert, criminal defense attorney Johnny Ray. Thank you both for being here. I want to take a listen to this. We took a look at the state's motion to deny bail, and in it, they laid out a lot of allegations and details in this investigation. Let's take a listen as one of our producers reads it.
In March 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force extracted a Microsoft Word document entitled HK200204 from Heuermann's laptop computer. The task force members believe the Microsoft Word document to be a planning document utilized by Heuermann to methodically blueprint and plan out his kills. The HK planning document begins with the 4-category section with the underlined headings of problems, supplies, DS, and TRG. It is believed the DS heading appears to be an acronym for dump site, which is corroborated by the discovery of Valerie Mack at 2 separate dump sites, one of those locations being the vicinity of Mill Road, which is listed as DS-1 Mill Road. As detailed previously, TRG appears to be a reference to target or victim. At the time of Miss Mack's disappearance and murder, she was approximately 5 feet tall and weighed less than 110 pounds, fitting the small is good note. The members believe supplies to be a reference to what supplies are needed to carry out the serial murders. One of the listed supplies is foam drain cleaner. A review of Heuermann's Nextel cellular phone records reveals that on October 3, 2000, Heuermann appears to make 2 outgoing calls to a plumbing company based in Lynbrook. In mid-November 2000, Heuermann paid $265.83 to yet another plumbing company to check his mainline drain. The supplies section also includes notes to utilize rope or cord and bags and tape, each of which were recovered with the remains of the victim. The HK planning document contains a body prep section with a note to remove head and hands, which clearly relates to the condition of Valerie Mack's remains. Additionally, Valerie Mack was indeed packaged for transport, as this section indicates to do. Finally, the body prep section above includes a note to remove ID marks, tattoos. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force interviewed several witnesses who confirmed Valerie Mack had a tattoo on her foot or ankle which depicted her son's name. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe the defendant amputated Miss Mack's lower right leg at the mid-calf to inhibit and/or delay the identification of Miss Mack's tattoo and therefore Miss Mack.
A lot of details there. Dr. Catherine Ramsland, your thoughts about this little 4-column list that he had with the problems, supplies, DS, TRG. What does it tell you about the accused killer?
Well, the first thing is it starts in his fantasy life. He will have already thought about all the things he needed to do. This is not just a planning document, it's a checklist and it's a journal of some of the mistakes that he's made and the things that he wants to avoid in the future to ensure success and to ensure maximum time with the victim. So we have a guy who's wanting to take control of things. Part of that is writing everything down, and it reminds him what he needs to do. And things like getting enough sleep, because when he's tired, he's not as effective. Using a thicker rope, because a thin one breaks. Small is good. That's a body that can be more easily lifted and transported. So he's keeping a record, but also planning ahead.
John, I want you to take a listen to the DA here talking about something else that was mentioned in those papers I think is extremely significant here.
At around the time of the commission of this crime, there was a plumber did go to the Heuermann residence. Well, I mean, obviously we don't have to specifically prove where they happened. We just, we have other elements that we need to prove. But I think if you look at this case, if you look at the planning document, if you look at the adhesive staining on the walls in a sort of enclosed pattern, certainly all of that is consistent with the commission of those murders occurring at the home.
John Ray, do you believe that these killings and perhaps others took place at the home?
Yes, many of them, perhaps most of them did. Now, Ray Tierney seems to be on board with that theory along with the detectives. But that would not necessarily bring up a point I've been making for well over a year, and that is that the family is involved in this. And if you look at the list that Dr. Ramsland was just referring to, you'll see that in one of the pages he puts down, dispose of the following, and then he has bullet, what you wore. Not what he wore, not what I wore, what you wore. Somebody's giving him advice. This is a list that potentially somebody else made to give him advice about what to do. And if you look at things to remember, get sleep before hunt, right? These look like they're advices from somebody. Now, does he give him advice to himself? Possibly, but certainly possibly it's somebody else. And think about the hair that was found on the body for Valerie Mack. If you look, it's a female hair. There are now 4 bodies with female hairs that connect with either Victoria Heuermann or with the wife, Åsa Ellerup. 4. You know, one is perhaps just a coincidence. 2, 3, now 4. All of those bodies are found in different years at different times, and they all have the same female hairs types on them. And think about it, when Valerie Mack is killed, the child is, Victoria is only 2 years old. So the likelihood that that hair got there in 2000 isn't very strong, but it got there later. Are these people revisiting the bodies after they're killed? Take into account what Rex Heuermann did when he called one of the girl in Buffalo. He called her sister, Melissa Barthelemy. And he said to her, he was watching the body rot. He was returning to the scene. Was he returning with other people? Why are there 4 hairs? You have to ask yourself, look, if you're going to indict Rex Heuermann because of DNA on a hair, why are you not looking more closely at his family and their hair being involved? Why are you not looking at them and not just at him in this case? It's becoming more and more of a strained point that the family's being ignored. And we have other evidence.
John, I want to do this, John. Before you get to that, I want to get some reaction from Dr. Catherine Ramsland.
Sure.
But prosecutors have said, and the attorneys for the family said, they have no involvement. They haven't been charged yet. But obviously, John has his theory. Dr. Catherine Ramsland, what are your thoughts about this to-do list? Could it involve other people giving him instructions, or is he talking to himself in the third person?
Well, it can't be. We can't say he definitely got instructions from someone else. However, he was looking at books, and one of the books was a book I did some of the research for, The Cases That Haunt Us by John Douglas. He was looking at books, taking notes from those, thinking about himself in that context. And actually, it's similar to some of the things that Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, wrote to himself. So it could have been notes to himself.
And what are your thoughts about the body, like mentioning that he's watching the body? Do you think he is just trying to torture someone, or is he literally telling them, listen, I'm watching the body?
Both. I think he might very well have been there, but he also really wanted somebody to suffer. He wanted to experience the power that gave him to listen to someone's response to him. He didn't want to see that body all by himself. It was a way to share and get a sense of domination.
And what do you think he's thinking right now, knowing that he's been charged with yet another victim? Is he angry with himself? Is he frustrated? How would that manifest itself, someone based upon the way he planned this?
Well, I think you can see from his list that he knows that there's a risk, because he talks about having a story ready and that he has made some mistakes and he has to do better. So I know he realizes there's a risk, but I also think he might have a sense of narcissistic immunity, that they can't really touch me because I'm smarter than them and they're really not going to get me. All
right. John Ray is going to stay with me. Big thank you to my guest, Catherine Ramsland. If you want to hear more, you can read her book, How to Catch a Killer, Hunting and Capturing the Most Notorious Serial Killers. Thanks so much. Still to come, should investigators be looking for more victims?
The defendant is now charged with the murder of 7 young women.
Healthcare CEO was gunned down. Police have arrested Luigi Mangione.
Court TV and Scripps News take you inside the investigation that's captured the nation's attention.
Assassination of a CEO, Wednesday at 7 on Court TV.
This was a depraved game of chicken.
Driving the wrong way into oncoming traffic.
He basically kidnapped me. There was not a kidnapping.
The fake kidnapping murder trial. Trial coverage weekdays, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Today, my office filed a superseding indictment charging the defendant Heuermann with a 7th charged murder in the 2nd degree for the murder of Valerie Mack, which occurred in 2000. The defendant is now charged with the murder of 7 young women. Sandra Castilla from 1993, Valerie Mack from 2000, Jessica Taylor from 2003, Maureen Brainerd Barnes from 2007, Melissa Bartholomew from 2009, Megan Waterman from 2010 in June, and Amber Costello from September of 2010. Again, they occurred between 1993 and 2010. We are here because the Gilgo Task Force has continued to work together to obtain not only evidence for the charged crimes, but has continued to work on other uncharged crimes as well.
There are more victims. Like, he's been charged with 7, but there are others who were found, and he hasn't been charged with some of them. And I want to take a look now at that beach so you can see the sheer number and where they're found. And you begin with Amber Lynn Costello, who he has been charged with that one. She was found nude, wrapped in burlap. Then you've got Melissa Bartholomew, another victim he's been charged with, nude, wrapped in burlap. Then there is Maureen Brainerd Barnes, who was also found nude, wrapped in burlap, and the accused killer has been charged in that one. Megan Waterman, nude, wrapped in burlap, also another one of his alleged victims. Then you have John Doe, Asian male, 17 to 38, found wearing women's clothing, but no charges associated with that yet. Jessica Taylor, we've been talking about Jessica Taylor. Skull, hands, and right forearm found on Gilgo, but the torso was found in Manorville, 2003. He's been charged in that one. And of course, Valerie Mack, her skull, hands, and right foot found on Gilgo, but the torso found in Manorville. There's a little baby, Baby Doe, 16 to 32 months old, the daughter of Peaches. And we have a Jane Doe known as Peaches because of a peach tattoo. Peaches' remains were found miles west of the Gilgo 4 and even further away from Baby Doe. Baby Doe is Peaches' daughter. Her other remains were found near Hempstead Lake in 1997. And then, of course, we have Shannon Gilbert, how all of this began. Her body's found east of Gilgo Beach off of Ocean Parkway near Oak Beach, and no charges there. But these victims have at least been found, which brings us to our next question in our investigation, which is, should investigators be looking for more victims? Right? Are there missing women from the area or in that line of work who are unaccounted for? We're talking about a huge spread of time here. Joining me, former homicide detective, host of The Interview Room with Chris McDonough. Chris McDonough is with us, and still with us, attorney Johnny Ray. John, are there other families of missing women who suspect that their loved one might be a victim and they haven't been found?
Yes, there are several, and they're multi-state. And Heuermann, he's traveled a great deal. We were able, for example, to put my staff and I put together that he was a hunter, and if you look at his list of things to remember, he puts down, get sleep before hunt. And then he says, hunt too long, seen in the area too long. He's hunting these girls. And he's following in the footsteps of a guy from Alaska, from Anchorage, named Robert Hansen, who hunted his girls down, made them take their clothes off one at a time as he would catch them and let them go again. Very similar to what appears to have happened to Shannan Gilbert. And Heuermann ends up with a license in Anchorage, Alaska, along with his sister-in-law. He stays at his sister-in-law's house in Anchorage, Alaska. His brother has a telephone registered in Anchorage, Alaska. And there's over 100 people missing in the area around Anchorage, Alaska. Most of them women, many of them sex workers.
Wow. Wow.
That's just one spot of many. We're looking deeper and deeper into that. I foiled all the records from that for Anchorage, but that connection is real, and he's hunting. So he's hunting on Long Island. He's hunting in other places. I have several people I represent, women who were hunted by him and escaped, and they're in Florida, New Jersey, South Carolina. They're in several states, upstate New York, where this has happened. So this is what he likes to do.
Let me do this, John, just before we run out of time. I want to get Chris to respond to everything that you're laying out there. So Chris McDonough, former homicide detective, do you think law enforcement will pursue any of this? And what do they need to try to connect this killer to these missing women and to find them?
Well, absolutely, Vinnie. I think they're definitely going to have to pursue it. And, if we look at the totality of the circumstances here, and we go all the way back to '93, remember that these guys operate on a fuel source, i.e., some type of fantasy fuel. Okay, and back then in '93, they didn't have the internet. Okay? You had to go to the local store and find your fuel source, for lack of a better term. And then from there, as he's learning, the hunter is learning, at every kill, they take something away from it. And if they get to a place where it becomes, quote, boring, okay, then they're going to change their MO, and they're also going to change, where their hunting ground's going to be. Just like every single year, Hansen was an interesting guy because he used to take his victims up to Alaska. He would fly them in. And then cut them loose into the wilderness and then hunt them down. If Heuermann is of that type of personality where he gets bored around his environment, he's going to look for other environments. And I think one that is low-hanging fruit is also going to be Las Vegas, because he owned a lot of property in Las Vegas. And out there, in the desert, you can do a lot of very interesting things. So I think John's onto something, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. John Ray, we're out of time for tonight, but appreciate it. Thank you so much. Chris McDonough, thank you as well. Everyone in our system of justice is presumed innocent, even accused serial killers. But the reason it's more difficult to have an open mind in these cases when you're not on the jury like we aren't, right, is because of the number of victims, the patterns you see, and the immense use of manpower in investigating these cases. It just makes it seem so overwhelming. But ultimately, it will be the jury who will decide. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.